In this video, we're going to talk about how to select personas so that you can use them effectively in the immPACC session. Personas really drive the conversation, and they bring a different lens into the conversation across different stakeholders as a focal point. So it becomes less about who's doing what in what program and how the programs and how we need to interconnect to support individual people who need to get vaccinated. And this just changes the dynamic of the conversation. And with that pivotal role of personas, it's really important to pick them correctly. So it's often a question, well, how do I do that? And so that's what I want to talk about briefly in this video. So I want you to think about the first step, which is to understand the community. And that means finding some data. And data, broadly speaking, you want to find local information about the community, where the gaps are, what those challenges are, those structural barriers, those reasons for low confidence, and then use that data. So I think it's important to then use the data to then select the persona. So you want the persona to reflect the gaps, not necessarily the whole population, because potentially in a community, large parts of the population are vaccinated, and there's sub-pockets that have the hesitancy or the difficulty getting access. So use the data to drive the selection, to find those gaps and then illustrate them through the choice of personas. That's really the key thing here. And to think about it in terms of not just quantitative data, because quantitative data will tell you who and how many, but you want to get some local expertise as well. So it's really important in the preparation stage to ask some questions and find a few key informants to talk to understand why the barriers are there, what the hesitancy, what the low confidence is. And that then helps also inform your selection. So it's not just that you want to have more people between the ages of 20 and 35, but you also want to then understand why in that age group, because there can be many different reasons. And so then they can reflect those in the personas. So a couple important things about personas. They do tell a story, and you want that story to feel realistic, even though it's not about a particular individual person. So we have in many of our personas put placeholder text in and highlighted it for you, and you can insert local color, local flavor. It might be the name of a restaurant, or it might be a particular type of work, or a particular location in town, and we'll put in some generic descriptor, and you can then add in the actual neighborhood so that the people around the table really makes them feel like it is a real discussion as opposed to truly a simulated case. Persona are tailorable that way, but you can always adapt them as well. So feel free to, if Bob here needs to be a chef, make Bob a chef. That's totally fine. You can do whatever you need to fit the persona to the community. If it's a major change to a persona, and suddenly Bob is not only a chef, but he's 22, and Bob's a woman, then we might as well just make a brand new persona. So we keep Bob, the persona as is, and then we create a new persona. So feel free to make new ones or ask us and we can help you to make a new persona. But if little tweaks beforehand, you can absolutely do that. I encourage you to do that. We even sometimes find that we do small changes on the fly as well. If the conversation is going one way or another, or somebody in the room in the discussion says, well, if it really depends. If Bob was Hispanic, this would be different. Okay, let's explore that. Let's assume that Bob is. Where do we go from here? And it's okay to do that. The personas are there to help guide the conversation, and as a facilitator, you can guide the nature of the persona to have the right conversation for that community. So feel free to do that along the way. The other thing to think about with personas is typically in a session, you're going to do 3 to 5 persona. We generally recommend you plan 6 and then order them in a certain way. So the easiest one is the first one, and it gets people talking. And then the really important ones are numbers 2 and 3. And then 4, 5, and 6 become a little bit less important. But you get that diversity. So between 2 and 4, you get as much diversity as you can, and then 5 and 6 are there for backup. If the conversation goes slowly, you're only going to get to 3 or 4. If it goes quickly, you've got a backup at 6. Then think about those as a puzzle. So you don't want them all the same. You want to have the variety, the diversity, highlighting the different areas, the different gaps, the different populations that you want to talk about across the different persona. And so sometimes you might say, well, it'd be great if this person has a needle phobia, but we're also going to have a needle phobia in persona 3. So then maybe pick another reason for a barrier as opposed to have everybody with a needle phobia. So again, another reason to adapt a persona is you can just make those little tweaks to give that variety. Again, that's totally fine. Just do that as part of your own planning for the session. And the last thing I want to talk about is our persona library. So we have developed a library that's available to you as a facilitator. Right now, there's currently 20 persona. We're going to have more than that by next week and more beyond that. This is a searchable database that's available for you freely online. And you can go through and look at the different persona, pick which ones you want, and you can search based on a number of different criteria, just using some simple keywords. Any persona you want to learn more about, you just simply click on them, open up their page, and we'll show you all about this in the session. But you get the persona introduction, the story about them, and some prompting questions that you can use in the session. So it gives you a nice piece of material that then helps drive that session, and the lead facilitator will read this out and read out the individual questions during the session. So all this is here. If you then develop your own persona, or we develop new persona with you, we'll encourage you to share them back, and we'll share them in through the library. So that way the library will grow for everyone. With that, I'd like to thank you for listening, and we'll see you at the session.